Good evening, ladies and gents. This is the Elbows Down MotoGP podcast. This is another in-between episode, if you like, between races. We've got a bit of a 3-week gap, haven't we, since Thailand? And we were expecting a frenzy, Keelan, of rider market explosive announcements, like just before the race weekend of the Grand Prix of Thailand, or during, or just after. And we never got any of that. Disappointingly, actually. But I like it when things sometimes are decided later on in the year and riders have earned their way to these contracts. But yeah, by the way, hi, Keelan. I was went straight into that, folks, but there we go. No messing. um, this this is a bit strange because at first I think a lot of us thought it was just down to Marquez because obviously Marc can depict if he just does one more year or 2 more years, right? You know that. Okay, and he's umming, he's injured, he's sore. He's probably going to win another championship this year. We know, so does he need another one after that? He's not 100% sure. He just saw. We know this. But other than that, Keelan, there has been talk of a Formula One style Concorde agreement, hasn't there? I mean, before I get onto that, how important do you think that is for MotoGP? Do you think that formula can work before we go into details? And do you think it's important? Do you think it's important to get this out sorted first so budgets for teams are sorted? Or do you think the likes of someone like Pecco Bagnaia, who's unhappy at Ducati, should be signed up now? What are your thoughts on this before we go in deep into the Concorde thing?
So, first of all, good evening, Jim. Great to be back. Hello, everybody. It's great to be back, of course, on another episode. We are officially, probably for the first time ever, we can call ourselves in-betweeners because we are literally in between 2 major rounds of the championship. I have been called Neil before. I won't get into that, but it is what it is. Yeah, there's a couple of different things to talk about here because there are a few different moving parts. And this Concorde style agreement is maybe the most interesting thing that's come up since the opening round. Now, to answer your question about is it important to have all this stuff in place before we basically hit silly season, I would argue yes, it probably is more important because when you have the basis of the championship established, then everything kind of falls into place on top of that. So when we have sort of budgets in place and revenue sharing agreements in place, it kind of helps everybody know where they stand a lot better in terms of this season and, of course, immediately beyond that. And I think in the context of next year, where, of course, we're going through major regulations changes, having a potential Concorde style agreement in place now before we get into a crazy rider market, I think it makes a lot of sense to maybe have that ratified first before we get into everything else because at least that way everybody knows where they stand in terms of money, in terms of what they can budget to different riders, different pieces of equipment and all that sort of thing. So if that is what's holding it up, it makes a lot of sense. Of course, we don't know for sure why nothing's happened, but if that is the reason, then yeah, it definitely makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I think it does as well. We also does give other riders that maybe weren't in with a shout of a certain ride a chance to prove their worth. And that stands for that stands for Moto2 riders as well, folks, who might be overlooked in favour of current MotoGP riders to get a ride. But if you don't really know much about the Concorde agreement, folks, or you're not really that fussed about reading articles, or you don't know about the Formula One Concorde thing, it's sharing of the income from the sports revenue across the teams. That's how they do it in Formula One. It used to be quite an unfair share in Formula One. That's been rectified in recent years. I think it was 11 teams, 10 teams. And it was really, really like a massive fat portion, if you like, for the big teams. And if you weren't getting points or you were down below, it was really hard to develop a car good enough to catch up the rest. Now, that has been rectified in recent years in Formula One for the Concorde agreement so that these revenue sharings are fair. So, obviously, since Liberty came on board, that's been rectified. Obviously, you do see more cars scoring points now. In MotoGP, you don't really need it in that regard as such because every bike now, more or less, 90% of the MotoGP grid is a factory machine now. Okay? So, that's already done. What's good about having more money is more control. Well, not for the teams for making the rules. We don't want that anymore. With the MSMA, there's too much power for the teams for making rules in that regard for rules. But what is good, if this Concorde agreement goes ahead and more revenue is spread across the teams and money, it could well attract new manufacturers because At moment, it's only the satellite teams, folks, that get a share, that get direct funding. Okay? Factories do not get it, but they would under a Concorde agreement. This could potentially attract other manufacturers, which MotoGP has been crying for a while, especially since the back end of 2022 when we lost Suzuki. Okay, that their donor at the time, before whatever you want to call it keeps changing. Donor at the time did not want to sell the grid slots to a satellite team moving up from Moto 2. And they just didn't want to do it. Or Ducati, another satellite team, popping up somewhere, or whatever. Those slots were for a new manufacturer. So this sort of thing could attract a new manufacturer. No one's really saying like that, but by logic, it would do. It would do. Because then a new factory would see a return on their investment. Simple as that. So that's probably
Exactly,
why.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's simple as that, weirdly enough. But yeah, I think this is the main reason, this is a potential reason why the silly season has slowed down, as well as Marquez playing silly buggers, potentially. But it is quite exciting, isn't it, Keelan? Because in theory, if Liberty are owning the sport now, we're going to see their method of things in the sharing be put into action now with MotoGP, because it's worked in Formula One. Yes, we know, folks, we've talked about before, now everything Liberty have done with Formula One will work in MotoGP. We know it won't work with bikers. But in terms of helping the teams financially across the board and making it attractive to manufacturers, that is exciting. If that works, then we're winning in another way. Okay? So that is good news, folks. It could be a while till we hear like there is an agreement. It could be spring, it could be summer, couldn't it, Keelan? I think that's anyone's guess, really, on when an announcement with the Concorde agreement is finished.
Yeah, it's definitely up in the sky at the moment. Nobody knows for sure when this thing's going to be fully sort of set out. But I just want to say something before we briefly move on, because there is another interesting aspect potentially to this agreement. The two big benefits that Jim's basically already outlined are, one, it's going to make the sport much more financially viable for existing teams. So
Yeah,
teams, for example, like KTM, that
yeah,
might have been financially in trouble, it
yeah,
could help buttress and
yeah,
stabilize their factory efforts
yeah,
so they don't leave the sport. And the other effect that it's really going to have is manufacturers, perhaps who've never been in MotoGP or who were in before but had to leave, all of a sudden they're back in play again. So
yeah,
BMW, Kawasaki, maybe a return for Suzuki.
mm,
These things are suddenly much more on the table now because they're getting an actual dividend from the global exposure that they're getting.
mm, mm.
So, I mean, we're obviously, and we talked about this last episode, we're not the biggest fans of everything Liberty's done with F1. In fact, quite a lot of it we're really not a fan of. But the Concord Agreement is one very good thing that Liberty Media have done. And if it can be translated correctly to MotoGP, it could make the sport a much more financially healthy place to be in.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the only side effect if it all goes too well, is that you fall into the potential pit of Liberty increasing a racetrack's hosting fee, and then the
Yeah,
ticket prices have to go up.
yep.
And then you're in trouble, because we said it before. There is many bike fans, granted, that will go to Formula One and MotoGP. Yeah, there is. I'm one of them, to a degree. And I mean to a degree, because the prices are a lot more. But a lot of bike fans, MotoGP, World Superbike fans, will not go to both, and they'll only pay for MotoGP. So yeah, you got a double-edged sword of a Concord agreement. It could have like a bad domino effect. As Liberty grow and grow with MotoGP, I just hope that MotoGP fans aren't totally ripped off to the point where there's 5,000 people there on Sunday at Silverstone in 2027. That wouldn't be good. But yeah, I think we get ahead of ourselves a bit there, because it'll take years for a Kawasaki, as you say, or BMW to develop a bike again. Suzuki is probably the most realistic. There's been murmurs of them eventually coming back, not ruling it out. I think that's most realistic. But the fact of the matter is, if the engines are cheaper, there's less aero you have to develop. You don't have to develop a ride height device. Then and the added Concorde agreement, yes, it's more attractive, folks. So just no, listen out for that, because Liberty is slammed a lot, but this is one of the things that they could really help from MotoGP. And I think I missed something at the start that Keelan brought up. Is number one is it helps the current teams, not just attract new manufacturers, keep current teams in the sport. I mean, this sort of thing could have helped the likes of, well, I mean, some teams were sold, so it was fine. Like the likes of Avintia, maybe when Ford Racing were in MotoGP, then they went purely just to Moto2. There was a few Moto2 teams that went up. I don't know if you remember, folks, and then went back down during the CRT era. And then some stage of MotoGP briefly, like Aspar, and then went back down. Maybe a Concorde agreement could have helped them stay, but ifs and buts and maybes. So I think we've pretty much covered that for now. Other than that, it's speculation, really. But yeah, you mentioned link to it slightly, Keelan. Rider minimum
Yep.
salary, rider minimum salary agreements as part of a deal, massively important throughout the classes, I would say, wouldn't you?
Yeah, this is hugely important, and I do actually, as of course being on the show, we want to give credit to the sources that we use. The first place that I saw this was Oriel Puigdemont at Autosport, so shout out to them, of course, for having the story. And to put it very
Pretty good, actually. They've done that before. Some good
yeah,
snouts going
yeah,
on. Yeah,
very good snouts. But to put it very simply, folks, basically what we're talking about is riders in the Premier class. There's no discussion about Moto 2 or Moto 3 yet. Hopefully that'll follow in the future. But the discussions are that riders in the Premier class would basically be guaranteed a minimum salary of 500,000 euros every season that they compete in MotoGP. And the reasoning for this is, of course, in MotoGP, as with pretty much any motorsport, there's a very, very big disparity between salaries in MotoGP. So you've got people like
yeah,
Marc Marquez who've earned up to 20 million euros a season at times. You have Fabio Quartararo who earns, I think, about 12 or 13 million euros from his Yamaha contract. And then you have some riders who are either making very little or are actually paying just to compete in the class. And what this would basically do is, at the risk of stating the obvious, it would basically provide a financial sort of lifeline and a security line for riders to be able to sort of compete in the class worry free and not have to worry about putting their hands in their pockets for things and wondering if they're going to be able to afford to keep competing. And the report from Autosport, again, if you don't like reading articles, frankly, neither of us blame you. But basically, the report says that this discussion is in the final stages of consideration before being ratified. So this could be introduced much sooner than you think. And I don't want to speak for you, Jim, but I think this is a brilliant thing. I think it's long
yeah,
overdue.
yeah.
And not only do I hope it's implemented, but I hope Moto 2 and Moto 3 get something similar as well.
Yeah, I do. I do. Boringly enough, folks, I agree with everything you just said. Not as a cop out, I just agree with everything you just said. But with Moto 2 and Moto 3, it is more complicated than that, folks. Not every, I mean, not every team's going to be able to afford a minimum wage or select. It's just different. And Liberty, again, I keep saying that word. I don't know why it makes me do that.
Yeah,
I don't know if they can help with that, but I think if anything, they're only focusing on one category, and that's MotoGP. But
which is true.
um, they do it, back and back again. A Concorde agreement could work in the lower classes. It's getting more and more. Well, I think what's going to happen with Moto3 is they're going to change the format entirely from the engines and the chassis to make it cheaper. So that might be saved within its own right and plans anyway. Because that's grid looks a bit depleted. Do you remember when? Well, I think they had to limit it. But do you remember when Moto3 had like 36 bikes in the grid at one point?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and now
do.
it's 20, and now it's like 26, 28, maybe sometimes like when there's a wild card or something. But yeah, those teams, those slower teams struggle and they rely on pay riders. And then you get into that. Thing is, pay riders will probably always be around, let alone having minimum salaries. It's just not going to happen in those categories, really. A lot of these riders, almost every single rider in the lower category, probably relies on their helmet, leather, and boot contract. If they get paid 50,000 euros from Ixon for the leathers, then Alpine Stars give them like the same or like 20,000 to wear their gloves and boots. That's probably making most of their salary, and the team might just pay for their expenses. That's me
Yeah.
knowing a few numbers from a few years ago, folks. So don't ask me who that was because it's probably well out of date now. I do recall. Once a certain MotoGP rider uses Ixon leathers. Yeah, it's Ixon. Yeah, and he was getting paid 40,000, I believe, from Ixon a year. That was in Moto 3, and that was about 10 years ago. But yeah, what I'm saying is these guys in those lower categories, guys, do not get paid really unless you're an Aspire rider or Red Bull KTM IO, maybe Tech 3, their KTM team. Yeah, that's about it. There will be a few others, of course there will. But maybe Honda Team Asia, not sure. But it's predominantly going to be like your leathers and your helmets and your boots that sponsor you, and you get your stuff for free, and you'll get some money. That's how they live. So I don't think that'll change because I don't know how you enforce that. I don't know where the money would come from. Frankly, there's not enough exposure money going into it from sponsors anyway from Moto3 and Moto2. I think it's probably the same, Keelan. I'm guessing from F3 and F2 for the car world. I think almost all of those drivers, unless they're a Red Bull athlete or they've got big backing from someone, they're probably paying for their drives. It's the same. It's been the same for an awful long time. That ain't going to change. But in the Premier class, it's a lot faster. It's a lot more dangerous. And yes, there should be a minimum wage. It's just obvious. The thing is, I don't really think that there's any pay riders left. It is the Keelin MotoGP. Don't believe there has been for some time now, apart from when Darren Binder maybe brought the green power sponsor, but I think he was only there because he was in contract with the Sepang International Circuit team of Petronas. There's no one in the grid that pays for riding MotoGP now, not to my knowledge.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. There's not one that I'm aware of.
No, it's not. It used to be a thing, like, didn't it? I mean, I think Rabat comes to mind is the most recent. Carol Abraham.
Yeah.
Other than that, folks, people say a lot of bitter people have said, "Oh, Spanish, of course, he's got the ride." Well, yeah, he's there because he's good, and they're not paying for it. So yeah, we're getting into something else there, but yeah, there's no pay riders left anymore. But yeah, fair pay, fair minimum wage has to be met at this level. It just has to be. Is there anything else you want to talk about on that subject you'd like to touch on, or have we pretty much covered that, Keelan, before we move on to the R46?
Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered it, Jim. Concorde agreement, we've been over that. Spin off on minimum rider salary, which I'm glad we mentioned. Of course, shout out Autosport for that. Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's pretty much covered everything.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk about VR46 and where they're going to go next year, manufacturer wise. There's been murmurs for years if they're going to leave Ducati. They're going to go for Yamaha. That never happens. I think that was Rossi's fan base that made that rumor up, to be honest. And then obviously Rossi being a Yamaha ambassador for a while, wasn't he? And that'll make sense. Or they're going to have Yamahas, and then that never happened. And then a year ago, the Aprilia one came about, didn't it? And it's still staying with us. And then you see the mock-ups on Instagram of the VR46 liveries on the Aprilia bikes that actually look really cool.
They do.
It just shows you how much more of a Grand Prix looker the Aprilia is, even with a livery like the VR46. Some people like it, yeah, fair. I'm not sure it's going to happen because when you do some homework, Lucio Salucci sounds like they're close to renewing with Ducati. And going into a new regulation era of 2027, it probably is. It could be a smart move to be honest with you. What do you think? What's your thoughts on that? I mean, I personally like Aprilia. I mean, in a perfect world, to have 6 bikes. So you have 2 satellite teams, and then it's exactly the same with Ducati. You'd have Grassini. Actually, no, you've already got 6. No, they'd only have 4 bikes Ducati. Be honest. Yeah, there's only have 4 bikes. So
God, yeah, you're right, yeah.
Yeah, because obviously it's so easy to forget we've already had 1 year of Pramac Yamaha. But what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts going forward with? It sounds like it's pretty much sorted for the Ducati with the R46.
Yeah, so this is really interesting, and I'm glad you've brought up the background because the context is very, very important here. As you know, and as you said, the first big rumor of a split with VR46 and Ducati were the Yamaha rumors, but like you said, that was more a fan rumor, and that kind of died off pretty quickly. What's interesting though about the Aprilia rumor is that that one stuck around a lot more than the Yamaha one did. And that makes me think that at the very least, there were discussions about how real this could be. Now, if you're asking my opinion, I personally would love to see a VR46 Aprilia MotoGP team because obviously Rossi won his 125 and 250 titles with Aprilia,
Yeah,
and it would be a
yeah.
beautiful sort of full circle moment
No,
to
I
have
would.
a Rossi it would just be really cool if you're a Rossi fan. You kind of
Yeah,
understand why it would be so meaningful. And
yeah,
plus, I think Aprilia would make the livery look a lot better. So there's also that. But
yeah, yeah,
like you said, and you're absolutely right to mention it, I think going into a new reg era, I think sticking with what you know makes sense if you're a satellite team. I think if you're a satellite team and you're jumping manufacturer into new regulations, that is a massive gamble because you don't know where you're going to land. But if you're VR46 and you're going into the 850cc era and you're already very well partnered with Ducati, it's probably the smart move to stick with what you know as opposed to jumping ship. That being said, if we were, say, sticking with the 1000cc bikes, I'd kill to see a VR46 Aprilia team. I think it would be brilliant.
yeah. No, I do. I think it's a slight shame, but you're right. That's what I was thinking. The powerhouse of Ducati being with them into a new era is probably more of a safety net. They're going to Aprilia,
It,
unless Aprilia made it extremely attractive to them financially. I think this is what happened with Yamaha and Pramac. Do you remember last year? There was not last year, the year before. There was rumours of them potentially getting free bikes for the first year,
yep, there was.
and getting paid to do it. Do you remember all this? So, and
I do, yeah.
it worked, yeah. Um, but the Pramac boss, I always forget the Pramac owner's name. I always forget his name.
Paolo
I
Campionati?
Yes, he took it. He was very bitter at the end of the 2024 Italian Grand Prix,
Yep,
when Bastianini just pipped Martini at the last corner for a Ducati Lenovo 1-2, and he saw Paolozzi and DG all chanting for that. So he's like, "Well, we have a works official rider in Martini, just in the Pramac squad. Why are they so much happy that Bastianini's beating him?" I I would remember thinking sometimes like that sounds like you can't be that pissed off and you're leaving Ducati for that. You were already breaking up with them, mate. But yeah, they must have made it a very, very attractive offer, Yamaha, and that's maybe what Aprilia would do if they had the money. I don't think even with the money of Piaggio Group that own Aprilia, for those who don't know, I don't think they've got the whack of the money that Yamaha had to persuade Pramac to join them.
yeah.
Yamaha is a bigger factory still. It just is. It's just a bigger company. Full stop.
And the
It's
the
just
other thing as well is, sorry, just to say really quickly, the other thing as well that you're right to point out about Campionati switching Pramac to Yamaha, because he said this at the end of the Mugello Grand Prix. They were basically offered factory spec M1s just in
yeah,
Pramac liveries, and that was
yeah,
a big
yeah,
part of the deal.
yeah,
Yamaha basically run four factory bikes. They don't run two satellites and two
yeah,
factories. They're all the
yeah,
same bike. So Aprilia would probably have to offer something very similar just to
yeah.
make the deal even remotely possible.
Yeah, well, Aprilia already when Aprilia first gave R&F Aprilia before it was bought by Trackhouse,
Hmm.
Aprilia's they weren't all that. They were not giving them enough factory treatment. They weren't giving them enough
No, they weren't.
attention, and I think Trackhouse, one of the conditions, made sure that they did. You have to do these things these days. It's not like pre 2018, let's say. It's not like pre 2015, let's say, to be sure. When satellite teams like Textra Yamaha that was a satellite team. Now they're partners. They really are partners, which is a good thing because people sometimes remember the golden days of 2005 to 2018 were brilliant. Sorry, the satellite teams were bloody nowhere. The satellite
Yep.
teams were a lot slower. You could have. I think I watched Laguna Seca 2008 a couple of months ago for obvious reasons. But the gaps between Valentino and Casey were massive, and you've got 30, 40, 50 seconds back. You've got some of the satellite riders, Giancarlo on the Brazil. And I'm thinking, we've all got rose tinted glasses. We were remembering the great battle at the front. But I remember at the time people thinking it'd be great, wouldn't it, if everyone had a shot to win. And now
Yeah.
it pretty much has got like that. So yeah, the factory teams are now giving factory stuff, factory engineers to the satellite teams. I think with the Yamaha thing, with the Pramac, yes, they made it sound good. I also think they pretty much had to because to develop a V4, they were going to need four riders, not just two. So it worked in Yamaha's favour anyway. But I am happy that most of the grid now is running factory equipment. It's only really even Alex Marquez is on the 2026 Ducati now. Last year, he
Hmm.
wasn't on a current 25 bike. He was on a 24. They're calling him the factory. I'm just trying to think of bikes that aren't factory anymore. I'm really struggling because we don't really. It's
Um,
so distorted now. What we learn, folks. And the Ducati thing is up in the air anyway because they're all on 24s with 26 tweaks. So, the KTM's are all factory. We know that because they all went back to the full factory colours a couple of years ago, and they said that was because Maverick and Anea will get factory treatment. So that's out of the question. Maybe Trackhouse, Keelin. I think Trackhouse will. They
yeah,
won't get the updates as fast as the factory boys. Surely not.
yeah, I think out of all the teams on the grid, the ones that are most likely to not have full factory equipment are probably Trackhouse. Yeah. I mean, Yamaha, we've literally just said they run four factory bikes. Honda definitely run four factory
Yeah, they
bikes.
do. Yeah, 100% they do.
We know Ducati's situation, and we know the KTM,
Yeah.
LCR, or not LCR. What am I talking about? Tech 3 and the factory are very, very
Yep.
close knit. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is probably Trackhouse is maybe the closest thing to an old school satellite team that we still have.
Yeah, it is the closest thing, but at the same time, if you look at how good Raul was in Thailand compared to his
Yeah.
Thailand the year before, and stuff this weekend of B could have been better, but yeah, it's close to factory stuff now. So we're light years ahead of what satellite teams, when they really were satellite teams, were light years away from that now, folks. Which is good, but it's not being said enough, I don't think. Speaking of teams or manufacturers, there's currently a 2-day test taking place in Jerez, Keelan.
Hmm.
We have Aprilia, Yamaha, and KTM in attendance. There's some full-time riders in there. Yamaha concessions, of course. Top Rack's there. We've seen some posts. We saw some. Yeah, Salvador was posting on Instagram. It's unclear. We're pretty sure. And by the way, this is. I read this is Peter McLaren. He's great. Freshnet was saying that Pirelli are there as well, but it's unclear if the 850s are there, if any manufacturer has brought an 850. It is unclear. Have you heard anything else about this, Keelan? Or because this is effectively private testing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and it's very interesting that it's come up at this particular time. The one thing I will say is, and to tell you the truth, I can't remember where I saw it, but somebody posted a picture from somewhere. I think KTM have an 850 at the test. I can't remember why or where I saw it, but I
It would make
think
sense
they
because they've done it already at Jerez, haven't they? That they posted in December.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So I have a feeling KTM have an 850 at the test. I don't know about the other two, but I think they'll have one there, and they'll be obviously they're working with Pirelli to try and get it sort of as closely configured as they can. But I mean, obviously we'll learn more stuff during and after the test, but it would be
Hopefully.
really interesting if Aprilia or Yamaha bring an 850. That would be very intriguing.
Hopefully. It depends what actually is said from likes of any of the official riders, if they say
Yeah.
anything or can say anything. I don't know yet how much riders are allowed to say about the Pirellis for a number of reasons. If they're allowed to talk about them while Michelin's their official supplier, they maybe are. I'm not sure how it works. That's not like it's a rider talking about a bike he's testing in Valencia Test that he's not contracted to you until the first of the next year. So I'm not sure yet, but I can't wait to hear rider feedback at Pirelli's. Proper rider feedback in a video. I want to hear them speaking about the front end feel. I'm sick of
Yeah.
MotoGP bikes and riders relying on rear end grip. I'm so tired of hearing about it. I want a rider to be able to really use a front end tire again, and that's what Pirelli's apparently we're going to hear about. But we'll see because obviously we haven't heard much about their MotoGP spec tire yet. Looking for. I mean, there's a few tests booked this year, isn't there, for Pirelli? There's a Pirelli tire test in Brno. I think there's one in Misano as well. Maybe Aragon. I could be. I know there's one in Brno, but there's 2 or 3 lined up for this year. Um, I think that's pretty much it for MotoGP. I want to just mention that I feel like I keep going about Luca Lanetta this winter, but he had a really, really rough crash with Sergio Garcia in the Moto2 race before the second restart. He had a great weekend in the Moto2 Thailand Grand Prix. He really was doing quite well, I thought. I was impressed with him over the preseason. He's hurt his leg quite badly, but him being off for the next race does mean we see again Dennis Hodger. back in Moto2. I know he's got a bit of a fan base going. Yeah, I thought he should have won the Moto3 World Championship once. I think he was wasted Moto2. He had a lot of chance Moto2 with the Trans, I think it was. But he is replacing him in the Speed RS team for Brazil, which is quite an early announcement. Obviously, he's going to have an operation, is Lucas, so they already know that he's going to miss Brazil. A bit of a shame. What were your thoughts on Dennis Foggia back when he was, the Leopard days? I remember most. He should have won a title, shouldn't he?
Oh, he should have. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know it was before my time in this show, but I've always been a big Dennis Foggia fan. And I
Yeah.
think even though Moto3 and Moto2 are obviously incredibly stacked, I find it very unfortunate that he doesn't have a place in the paddock because I think he's a really, really good rider. And he's a rider with all the experience and talent on God's earth. He's really, really good. And like you rightly say, I most fondly remember him from his Leopard days in Moto 3 because he was always fighting towards the front. And like you said, I think he absolutely should have had at least one, if not two, world championships in that class. Obviously, the Edeltrans move just didn't work out. It's unfortunate, but sometimes it happens. It just doesn't work. But I love Dennis Foggia, I
Yeah.
really do, and I'm delighted to see him get another crack in the World Championship.
Yeah.
And like you said with Luca Lanetta, depending on how long Luca Lanetta's recovery is, obviously we wish him a very speedy recovery, but he's an excellent stand-in to have. And you never know, he may well do very well for that team, and he might say, listen, if anything does come up, he could be a very good rider to have for a team still in the World Championship. You never know where this ends for him.
Well, that's it. That's it. He's got nothing to lose replacing for even just one race for Lynetta, because it's one of those things like, well, I've lost my place in this paddock. This track is new to the MotoGP world. Well, I've been for the last nearly 40 years. I've got nothing to lose, and we could end up having if he's good enough, we could end up having a bit of a Taya Passini situation where if he's good enough, he does a wild card a year, or Jorge Navarro, who keeps reappearing here, there, and everywhere. Um,
Jorge
so,
Navarro's like the Beetlejuice of the paddock.
so we'll see with Dennis Foggia. Yeah, I like him, but the thing is with Moto Two, when riders move up to Moto Two, it can be a bit of a graveyard for the best talent coming up that anyone's seen ever. And they go to Moto Two and get their ass handed to them. Some of them, the best tend to not to, but it is brutal category. I know we've said it. Me and Alex have said it, and Keelan said it 100 times, but Moto2 has been really, really tough for a lot of riders. And it's only just now where we're seeing the likes of Izan Guevara come to fruition in that class. Bear in mind, he was one of the best champions in Moto3 ever, one of the most convincing championships ever. Uh, Beat his teammate, who everyone thought was going to win in 2022, Garcia, for the Aspar squad. Went up to Moto2, being one of the next best things. Everyone was convinced, yeah, he'll go to MotoGP in a couple, like 2 years. And that was at the start of 2023. It's now 2026, and he's only won one Moto2 race, and he's now at the front. Yeah. So it's tough. It's tough. But I mean, there's a lot of riders in Moto3 now that we're convinced they'll go up. Keyless will go up. Of course, Keyless will go up. We never know. He could end up like someone like Foggia. It's tough. It's really, really tough. But yeah, we'll have to see how that goes. Can't wait now. I can't wait to see this track here. We keep sending each other stuff on Instagram, don't we, for this new track in Guyana? I'm obsessed with it. I don't know why. But it looks really fast, folks. If you go on Instagram and have a look at some of the onboards from the Guyana Brazilian MotoGP track, and that first sector looks mega. The first three corners,
Oh, it's a
and
lot of fun, yeah.
really fast. And then you've got a really Valencia-like infield, which doesn't sound very appealing, I know. But then as soon as they leave that, they're on to like a nice looking chicane, and then a right kink, and then a straighten in the last two corners. And the last two corners look like slipstream heaven. Maybe not in MotoGP, but certainly in Moto3, because that last corner is effectively a bit like the last corner in Estoril. I don't know if you remember, folks, the last corner in Estoril is it's almost a kink. So you could have some slipstream into the line. But it looks really fun. I'll tell you what, when have we last had a race, Keelan, where it's been 31 laps race since that is a short track? 31 laps. So yeah, that must be like a 1 minute 18 lap. It's less than 1 minute, 1 minute 20 lap. Surely something like that.
Yeah, it's got to be right around there because, like you said, I cannot remember the last time we had a plus 30 lap race.
Yeah,
It's damn near unheard of in the modern
yeah,
era.
it is. Yeah, I think Donington had 30. If Donington was what 2.3 miles,
Yeah.
2.4. Um, yes, you can comment if you want, folks, and correct me on that if you're a big Donny fan. Um, I have been 13 times, so yeah, back off. But yeah, Donington was 30 laps. But yeah, I can't wait for that. I really, really can't wait. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much all for this week, isn't it? I think we've covered everything. Next week it'll be preview, I guess, for Brazilian GP, and maybe there'll be someone's gone early before our Concorde Rimmet announcement, and Fabio or Pedro or Pecco will have announced something. Maybe even Mark. We'll have to see. But yeah, thanks again for joining. Wasn't too last minute this time. Thank you, mate.
No, listen, absolute pleasure, Jim, as always. Really, really fun to be part of the show and to break all this down. Thank you to all of you, of course, for listening every week. We don't do this without you, and we do it for you because you enjoy it. So, yeah, really great as always, and really looking forward to actually previewing and breaking down Brazil because that Guyana track, if, like Jim said, if you have never seen it, make sure you go and look at it before next week because it is a lot of fun. That first sector could be amazing, and I'm looking forward to breaking it all down. So I'll see you all then.
Yeah, I can't wait. And I nearly started going on about it again then, so I'll stop myself there. But yeah, thanks, folks. We have seen some comments and some ratings and a lot more plays, which is really nice to see because we really do enjoy doing this. If you do fancy giving us a 5-star rating, that's great. It does help. This is as if not, you just want to play, absolutely fine, guys. Chill wherever you are in the world. We just really enjoy seeing that the players are going up. It's really nice. That's good enough. Obviously, it would be nice to get some top ratings, but you don't have to do that. And but we love it. But
Yeah.
that's probably the first and last time I'll ever ask for that on a podcast because sometimes I hear it on other podcasts or YouTube videos. I'm like, oh no. But yeah, it'd be great. But thanks for just watching and listening. We really appreciate it, and we like doing it. So we'll be back for the preview for the Brazilian Grand Prix next week. Thanks, folks, and thanks, Keelan.
Absolute pleasure. See ya.